welcome back! Today we're going to talk about a special Shakespeare play that is considered a lost play, and that play is Cardenio. And this play has an interesting story with lots of interesting theories about it. And although there is some historical record of the existence of this play, we don't actually have a copy of this play anymore. However, there are several people who have posed theories that the play still exists in some form. The play was written very late in Shakespeare's life. It was possibly his very last play, and co-written with John Fletcher. John Fletcher also co-wrote some other Shakespeare plays, including the Two Noble Kinsmen. And it appears that the plot of the story was based upon a significant subplot in the book Don Quixote by Cervantes. Cervantes wrote Don Quixote in 1605, and it was translated into English in 1611. It took on immense popularity, and so it seems that Shakespeare and Fletcher used this subplot to create a play. Now, we know of the play's existence for a couple of reasons. There are two records of an actor being paid to be part of the play. It seems that it was performed twice in the court in 1613, 3 years before Shakespeare's death. The plot of the story, at least in Don Quixote, is about two couples. A young man named Cardenio, who's in love with a young girl named Lucinda, and they're pledged to be married. But then Cardenio is tricked by his friend Don Fernando, who is the second son of a duke. And because he's a second son, he's not going to inherit, and so he's looking for an opportunity to get rich through marriage. Don Fernando tricks Cardenio and tries to steal his girl. However, he had already had a relationship with a poor young woman named Dorothea, and he had an informal marriage agreement with her. However, he tries to cover that up and marry Lucinda. Of course, Lucinda's parents want her to marry this fancy upper-class guy, and so they try to force her into marriage with Don Fernando. When Cardenio arrives on the scene, he thinks that he sees Lucinda giving herself in marriage to Don Fernando. However, what he doesn't realize is that she's planning to commit suicide in order to stop the marriage. They discover this when they find a dagger and a note on her. She then runs away to a convent, where Cardenio, thinking that his love has been untrue to him, runs out into the mountains and goes insane. Meanwhile, Dorothea has also run away because her honor has been taken from her, and she goes to dress herself as a young shepherd. And we get the woman disguised as a man, which is very common in a lot of Shakespeare's comedies. Disguised as a young shepherd boy, she's discovered by the master of the shepherds, who then tries to attack her, realizing she's a woman. She narrowly escapes and is harrowed by all kinds of adventures in that vein. Don Fernando, meanwhile, goes to get Lucinda out of the convent and take her back. This is the state of all the characters when Don Quixote stumbles into them, and along with all of his foibles, he kind of inadvertently fixes all of their problems, exposing all the lies and all of the disguises and bringing them all back into the same place, where in recognizing all of their problems, they're straightened out. Don Fernando is back with Dorothea, and Cardenio has his sanity restored and he's back with Lucinda. Everyone lives happily ever after. What happened to the original script, we don't know, but there's a lot of clues throughout history. The first and most important clue is by a man named Louis Theobald, who in 1727 put on a play that he says he had edited from a lost Shakespeare script. Of course, in the 1700s, Shakespeare had been elevated to almost deified status. And so the thought of finding a lost Shakespeare play was intensely exciting. Theobald says that he edited the play. He clearly added an introduction and an epilogue, and obviously tweaked it here and there throughout. It's possible that he cut some sections as well, but he said, "I have the original Shakespeare manuscript which has come into my care." However, unfortunately, we don't have that manuscript anymore. Whatever Theobald was working from, it's gone. It may have been destroyed in a theater fire, but even in his day, his play was receiving a lot of criticism. There were several people who called it a fraud, that he just wanted to work up a play in the name of William Shakespeare. It wasn't the first time it had been done. Of course, Shakespeare's plays were not originally printed by Shakespeare. They were usually printed by some printer who had pulled together several different copies and printed them in quartos. Later on, when they were all pulled together after Shakespeare's death by some of his friends and put together in the first folio, we get a pretty clear indication of what was considered canon in that day. The process that all that went through is too complicated to talk about here now. But later on, reprintings were made of Shakespeare's complete works, including the second and third folio. And in those, frequently people would stick in plays that clearly weren't Shakespeare's, but they were just kind of trying to give, a bigger body of work to Shakespeare. Or, sell more copies. Ooh, look, it's a new play by Shakespeare. And who isn't excited at the thought that there might be some play by Shakespeare that no one's seen before? The two biggest criticisms that Theobald faced were, one, this play seems awfully late for a Shakespeare play. After all, Don Quixote's book was only translated to English a few years before Shakespeare died. Did he have time to accomplish it? Theobald argues, yes, he did. And the second criticism is that a lot of the language sounds more like John Fletcher than Shakespeare. And Theobald argued, no, I think it's really a Shakespeare play, not a Fletcher play. And there were a lot of people very excited about this. One person who was not so much was Alexander Pope. And Alexander Pope ridiculed Laius Theobald so much, and in fact included him in his famous poem, The Dunciad, as the King Dunce, that Theobald's reputation was a little bit soured. And it may be that Theobald was beginning to question some of the authenticity himself. His arguments that it wasn't Fletcher become softer and softer. Of course, he didn't call the play Cardenio, he called the play Double Falsehood, which appears to be the title of his own invention. Whether or not there is any authenticity to this play, or at least strains of authenticity, is still open to debate. The ardent Shakespeare published a copy with extensive notes that demonstrate connections between this play and other plays of Shakespeare. They also point out, very interestingly, that it wasn't until the 1780s that the actual historical record of the lost Cardenio play was discovered. So Theobald stumbled across the idea of a Cardenio play before we'd even found clear evidence from Shakespeare's day that such a play had existed and been put on. That's pretty telling. However, there's still the endless frustration of the missing manuscript. Now we can fairly well accept that it was a co-authorship between Shakespeare and Fletcher, much like Two Noble Kinsmen. The authenticity or veracity of Double Falsehood has floated in the background of history for many years. In the 1990s, Charles Hamilton published a claim that he had found the true Cardenio, and it was a play called The Second Maiden's Tragedy. However, pretty much everybody agrees that that play was by Middleton. Middleton's the same guy that wrote the really bad parts of Macbeth that nobody pays attention to. The extra witch scene that some people theorize he added to Shakespeare's already completed draft. The idea was very exciting and certainly sparked a lot of interest, but pretty much nobody accepts Hamilton's claim here. And reading his defense, his introduction to the play, it felt very full of contradiction and complexity to me. He certainly had several time issues, as well as contradictory claims against the authorship of Middleton. His claim was that these characters are more fleshed out than Middleton's characters would have been, and therefore they show the master stroke of Shakespeare. However, he also notes the luridness of some of the characters, which sounds a lot more like Middleton. He assumes that Shakespeare had pretty much mostly written the play already, and then gone back and adjusted it after he read Don Quixote to make it fit more. He goes on to explain away all of the play's faults by saying simply, "I'm going to lay aside all such apologies for Cardenio and tell you what I believe may be the truth. Shakespeare was tired out." And although it's very true that sometimes writers just lose steam, and sometimes they just happen to write a text that just isn't that good, it's still hard to hold to Hamilton's claims that this play is Shakespeare's. But I will give Hamilton some credit, because what he did do was reignite an interest in the play Cardenio, which led to a lot of people going back and re-examining Double Falsehood. Several productions have been put on where people try to reverse engineer the Shakespeare play out of the play Double Falsehood, patching and filling gaps, taking away some of Theobald's stuff. In any case, it's a fascinating story of a long-lost play that we wish we had still, especially since it demonstrates the combination of material by two of the greatest artistic minds, Miguel de Cervantes and William Shakespeare. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or watch another video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.